Hi there, back again to share another recipe with you today. This time I'm sharing a recipe for a gluten-free sweet pastry. I've had a couple of inquiries about making gluten-free sweet pastry, and up until the other week it was something I actually hadn't ever made before. So I checked out a couple of different recipes, and what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to show you one recipe today, which is one that I really like when I tested out, and then I'm going to show you another recipe a different time. And the reason I'm doing the two is the one I'm using today is actually, it uses ground almonds within the recipe. And I know for some people that might not be suitable, so I thought if I give you a couple of options, then you can choose which one's the best. So with the recipe today, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do basically the pastry itself. So I'm going to make the pastry and then bake it, and then just show you the finished flan case, because I'm just thinking with that, it's then a recipe that you can use however you want to use it yourself. And what I'll do, I'll put lots and lots of notes in the description below. So the recipe will be below in the description, and also lots of notes. But as always, if you have any other questions, then please do get in touch, and I'll be happy to be able to help you with those as well. So yeah, so I'll get on and show you the recipe. Okay, so into the bowl first, I'm going to pop some gluten-free plain flour. Now, when I did my short crust pastry recipe, and to be honest, whenever I make short crust pastry, I don't normally sift the flour. But to give you a lighter pastry, I think it's really good to sift the flour for this. So I'm using gluten-free plain flour today, and I'm using Asda gluten-free plain flour, which is my go-to flour. I've mentioned before about this, and the self-raising is great as well. I know in different countries sometimes plain flour is referred to as all-purpose flour. So that's, you know, either plain flour or gluten-free all-purpose flour, whichever is applicable for you. Okay, so I'm just going to sift that into the bowl, and I'm going to add some icing sugar in there. All the measurements, as I say, will be in the written description below for you to refer to. So I'm just going to pop that in. Again, like my short crust pastry recipe that I've shared with you, which I know is so popular on YouTube, I'm not adding any xanthan gum to the pastry. I've tried it a few times, and in my opinion, it definitely doesn't need it. So, you know, if we don't need any extra ingredients, I don't see the point in adding them in. So, okay, so that's the icing sugar then added. Okay, so I'm just going to add some salt in there. I'm adding salt today because I'm using unsalted butter. I have tried the recipe with salted butter as well, and both work. So whichever is your preference. I just think with using unsalted butter and then adding salt, you know how much salt's going in there, but as I say, it will work both ways. So if you want to make it and that's all you've got in with salted butter, then go for it. Now I'm going to add some ground almonds, as I mentioned before. That's what I'm popped in the recipe. I think the ground almonds add an extra element to the pastry, and the texture of it is so good when it's baked. I feel it's a bit cross between pastry and a little bit like a shortbread biscuit, and it's so good it can be eaten on its own, the pastry, I found. So I'm just going to whisk the dry ingredients through there. Okay, so just that. Okay, and then to that, I'm just going to add some cubed unsalted butter, and then I'm just going to rub this in. The pastry, like the gluten-free short crust pastry that I share with you, it's so lovely to work with. And I've tried both chilling it and baking it straight away. And I find that you definitely don't need to chill it once you've made this before you roll it out. It doesn't need to be done, because I say with standard pastry, that's done to relax the gluten, and there's no gluten in here, so we don't need to do that. So it's a lot of quicker process than making standard pastry, so you can just crack on and make it. So I'm just going to rub this in. Okay, so when it gets to about that stage, Don't worry if you've got a few chunky lumps of butter, it's absolutely fine. That will be good to go, and good to add the egg now at this stage. So I'm just going to beat an egg, and it's just a large egg that I'm using. For baking, I always have my eggs out at room temp, and I keep them out all the time like that. The eggs that I buy never go in the fridge. I just keep them out, and I've never had a problem doing that. I do get really good quality free range eggs, and I find you get the best results with baking with those. So okay, so just going to stir that through, and as soon as it starts coming together, then just get your hands in. It'll look really dry and you'll think that it's not going to come together, but it's surprising it does. I think what happens is when you start getting your hands in, the warmth from your hands start to sort of warm the sugar. This is just my theory. I'm not saying it's absolutely right, but I think that warms the sugar, and obviously that's going to produce that little bit of liquid as well. So with the whole egg that's in there, there's no additional water that we're going to be adding into this pastry, unlike we do with the short crust pastry. Okay, but I think it's a ratio of the full egg and having the icing sugar in there that doesn't need it. Okay, so once the pastry clears the bowl like that, I'm just going to pop this onto the work surface and then give it a bit of a knead. Okay, so I'm just going to lightly flour the worktop and I'm just going to give my hands a quick wash there. Okay, so I'm just going to knead it. As I say, I'm not adding too much flour to the worktop because I don't actually want to change the texture too much, and it isn't too tacky, so I don't find that it really needs too much flour being in there, being on there even. Okay, it's lovely to work with this pastry. It's about the third time I've made it now, and it's so nice to work with. And as I say, the beauty about gluten-free pastry, you're not going to overwork it, so you can squeeze it, and it's absolutely fine to do all that. You've no problem. It's not going to be fair, say the more you work it, the better it'll be to handle when you roll it out. So just keep going with it. Okay, and as I mentioned, we're not going to I'm not going to fridge this. It doesn't need fridging. The quicker you roll out the pastry once it's ready to go, the less time it's going to actually dry out with gluten-free pastry. So there we go. Okay, so that's ready to go. The flan dish I'm using today is a 23 centimetre. In the actual recipe for the original recipe for the pastry, it was up to 24 centimetre. So what I'm probably going to do today is just fill that as a little extra. And the pastry can be frozen at raw stage, so but roll it out and fill the dish that you want to fill, and then freeze it, because as I say, it's better to handle it at this stage rather than leaving it for any length of time. So what you can freeze it at raw stage, and you freeze it when it's fully cooked as well. I've got a few flan dishes now all ready to go in the freezer, some baked, some part baked, just ready to fill with things, because I've been testing them out over the last couple of weeks, which has been really good. I made a Manchester tart the other day with one of them, but I thought today what I will do, I'll just show you how, I hope you can see that properly, just show you how I'm doing this, and then what you can do then is you can use, as I say, the pastry for however you want. So if you come across a recipe that requires sweet pastry, then then you can use this recipe as required within the recipe that you're using, if that makes sense. So say, rather than filling it today, I mean, over time, there's many things I want to share with you on YouTube, but over time I will of course be showing a flan or something like that will require sweet pastry, but for now I just thought I'd show you the basic thing, then you've got an idea of how to go about it. Okay, so I'm just going to roll this around the pin, just give that pin a little bit of a okie dokie, and then just put that there, and then just lift it, and then what you just do, I really sort of lift it in and allow it lots of extra room to sort of wiggle it in. Okay, so I'm just gonna work my way around here as quickly as possible, because what you'll find is that the flan edge, sorry, is quite sharp, so it can sort of sever off the pastry before you quite got round to it. So and then what I'm doing is just working my way around and sort of easing the pastry down a little bit, so that allows for a bit of shrinkage when it bakes in the oven as well. So, and then just pressing it into the side a little bit, because then that then sort of gets a nice shape when it bakes as well. Okay, so if it looks like some parts of this looks a little bit thin, so you can just ease the pastry down a little bit so the sides of the pastry roll are a bit thinner, a bit thicker, sorry. I probably rolled this out a little bit too large if I'm being honest, but if you go a little bit smaller or more accurate to the size, then you'll be absolutely fine. Okay. Just going to ease that. Okay, so once you're happy with it, then just roll over the top like that. There we go. And then that's the finished thing. And probably, to be fair, today I should have actually gone a little bit thicker, because I didn't need to have that much pastry over today, but I have done. But it will still be fine. It'll just be a bit of a thinner flan base, but you can see how good the pastry is to work with. It really is nice and simple to work with. There we go. So, and I'm just going to prick the edges. I'll just grab a fork to prick the edges. Sorry, there. So I'm just going to prick the base there. Don't have to go right through. I think I did in a couple of places, but you don't have to go right through. It's just to stop the pastry from rising up. So now we're just going to bake the pastry blind at first. So just so it doesn't cook too quickly or too much, you're just going to line it with some greaseproof paper. Line it with greaseproof paper. And then I use baking beans, but you can use rice as well. Just make sure the rice has got no may contain warning on there. If, like me, you're gluten-free, which you will be if you're doing a gluten-free pastry base. Okay, so, and we're just gonna pour the baking beans in there. Okay, so because I'm gonna cook the tart fully, I'm just gonna bake this blind now for 15 minutes. And I'm going to whip it then out of the oven and remove the paper and the baking beans and finish off the bake. Okay, so I've just taken the tart out from the oven and it's just baked now, so it's just blind baked now for 15 minutes. I'm going to say fully bake the tart, so I'm going to remove the baking beans now and just pop them in a bowl. What I could have mentioned to you before, and I forgot to say when I've baked it before, what I've sometimes done is cut a round disc for the greaseproof paper, and then it just sits in the base a little bit better. I rushed on before and I forgot about doing that, so it just sits better, so you can always do that as well. Okay, so you can transfer them beans there. The base, to be honest with you, I'm so pleased it's turned out that way, because I didn't think it was going to turn out as well. I thought I'd gone really too thin around the edges, so I was a little bit panicky when I was showing you before, but all's looking really good. So now say let's part bake that for 15 minutes with the paper. Took it out, I'm going to bob it back in the oven now, and I'm going to bake it for another 10 minutes because I'm going to fully bake it, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's fully baked. Okay, so I've just taken the flan dish from the oven and that's now fully baked, and once that's cold that can be filled with anything, so it can be made into a Manchester tart, it can be made into a fruit flan, whatever you fancy. It can be filled with ganache and then topped with raspberries, anything like that. So say that requires no more baking, that's fully cooked. The thing what I'd say about with a flan, and I just noticed that I'd say just slightly overdone. So what you could do with the flan is once you've done the part bake, you take the paper out, you put it back in the oven, then just keep your eye on it at that stage. And once you're happy with the point it's baked at, then whip it out, just take it out at that point. If you're going to be baking it further, when you take the paper from it, you only put it back in the oven for 5 minutes. And as I say, I'm going to pop all the notes down below in the written description for you to check out. But as I say, that's the finished tart. There we go. So that's the first of the gluten-free sweet pastry recipes that I wanted to share with you. The original recipe I've used to make this pastry came from a site called Recipe Tin Eats. It's a standard recipe site, but there's some amazing recipes on there. The lady that writes the website is called Nagy, and she produces some fabulous things. So I would definitely say have a look. I'll put a link for a website below. Thanks as always for watching all the videos that I share with you. I appreciate it so much. If you already subscribed to my channel, thank you so much. And if you haven't, I'd love you to do so. And I look forward to being back again with you really soon. But in the meantime, take care and bye for now.